7 men's stories, exciting entertainment.
Lost in the Sahara. The astonishing survival story of Mauro Prosperi. One man, one marathon, one desert. Our new survival story. Mauro Prosperi was no stranger to extreme challenges. As an Italian police officer and an avid long-distance runner, he had tested his limits numerous times. However, nothing could have prepared him for the ordeal he faced in April 1994, when he took part in the Marathon des Sables. This grueling 6-day ultramarathon, spanning over 250 kilometers through the unforgiving Sahara Desert, is known as one of the most challenging races in the world. What began as a test of endurance soon turned into a nightmare when a fierce sandstorm blew Prosperi off course, leading to one of the most harrowing survival stories ever recorded. The start of the journey. Enthusiasm and preparation. The race started with great anticipation. Mauro Prosperi had trained for months to compete in this prestigious marathon. As the race kicked off, thousands of runners from around the globe set out across the searing desert. The heat was oppressive and the sand underfoot burned, but for most participants, this was all part of the adventure. Prosperi was filled with energy and determination. He kept a vigilant eye on his surroundings, his mind focused on the finish line, meticulously planning each step. The sandstorm, an unseen threat. However, on the 4th day of the race, a dark shadow appeared on the horizon. A sandstorm, known locally as the Chamsin, began to form. These storms are infamous in the Sahara, capable of materializing out of nowhere and engulfing everything in their path. Prepared for the worst, Prosperi pulled his goggles over his eyes and wrapped a scarf around his mouth and nose. Visibility dropped to 0, and soon he could no longer see the path or his fellow runners. The storm howled around him, the sand stinging his skin like thousands of needles. Desperate to stay on course, Prosperi tried to navigate through the storm, but without landmarks he unwittingly veered off track, deeper into the endless expanse of the Sahara, away from the other runners. The first few days, holding on to hope. When the sandstorm finally subsided, Prosperi found himself utterly alone. The vast emptiness of the desert stretched out in all directions with no sign of civilization or other competitors. Realizing he was lost, Prosperi's survival instincts kicked in. He decided to keep moving, hoping to come across a camp or a rescue team. Day after day, he trudged forward, the water in his canteen dwindling. Under the blistering heat of the Sahara, he sweated more than he could drink. At night, when temperatures dropped sharply, he huddled in his emergency blanket, trying to keep warm. Desperation sets in, searching for food and water. After 4 days with no sign of help, the reality of Prosperi's situation began to take a toll. The isolation of the desert was overwhelming, and the relentless sun sapped his energy. In his desperation, he stumbled upon an old, abandoned mosque rising from the sand. It offered some shelter from the sun. Inside the ruins, Prosperi searched for food and water. He spotted some pigeons nesting in the mosque and attempted to catch them. It was a difficult and exhausting process, but eventually he managed to capture a few pigeons and even some bats, which he ate raw. The taste was bitter and unpleasant, but it was better than starving. With his water supply gone, he resorted to drinking his urine, a desperate act that provided him with just enough hydration to keep going a few more days. The turning point, a caravan on the horizon. By the 7th day, Prosperi was physically and mentally exhausted. His body was weakened by the heat, his lips were cracked, and his head felt like it was going to explode. He could barely think straight, yet a glimmer of hope still burned within him. He knew he couldn't give up. On the 9th day, he heard a faint noise in the distance. It was the clinking of metal and the sound of hooves on the desert sand. With his last ounce of strength, Prosperi stumbled toward the noise. Finally, he saw a caravan of nomads. They wore traditional robes, and their camels were loaded with goods. The nomads spotted the disheveled man and rushed to his aid. They gave him water and wrapped him in blankets to shield him from the sun. It was a moment of relief and salvation. The nomads brought him to their settlement, where he received medical attention and was eventually taken to a hospital. Returning to life, a miraculous recovery. Mauro Prosperi had survived 9 days alone in the Sahara without adequate food or water, relying only on his survival instincts and sheer willpower. When he was treated at the hospital, doctors marveled at his resilience. Despite severe dehydration, malnutrition, and the physical and mental strain he endured, he had survived. Prosperi slowly recovered, and news of his survival spread worldwide. He became a symbol of human strength and determination. Aftermath. Lessons from the desert. The experience profoundly changed Mauro Prosperi. He had faced the relentless brutality of nature, but he had also discovered the immense power of the human will. After his return, he often said it was his mental strength and love for his family that kept him alive. He returned to the Sahara not to race, but to prove to himself that he no longer feared the desert. His story was immortalized in books and documentaries, serving as an inspiration to many. The Unbreakable Human Spirit. Mauro Prosperi's story is a powerful testament to the will to survive and the determination of the human spirit. Even in the most unforgiving environment, alone and without resources, he did not give up. His story reminds us that true strength often lies not in physical power, but in the mind and the determination to never surrender.
Feel free to follow this channel to avoid missing any new content. Disclaimer: the images are AI generated and are for illustration purposes. The stories on this channel are researched to the best of our knowledge.